What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly. Now, today we are going to be doing a bit of a crossover event, a bit of an intergalactic discussion. This is episode 1 of a 3-part series, but you can only find episode 1 on this channel. I'm going to be working with two good friends of mine, Steve and Tony Farina, to talk about Halo Jones. The 2000 AD strip went for 3 books in the 80s, written by Alan Moore, drawn by Ian Gibson. And what we've done is we have split the series, the whole 3-volume arc, across our 3 shows. So this episode is covering just book 1. And then, of course, Tony and Steve have got theirs booked out for books 2 and 3, completing what is often known as the incomplete saga of Halo Jones. Now, if you want to find out where these shows are, stick around to the end of this podcast and I shall give you links, or check in the notes below on your device and you will find links to those other 2 podcasts. But anyway, sit back, enjoy, and let's start our discussion around the British comic icon that is Halo Jones.
First off, one of the questions I have, and this goes to all, is when did you first come across Halo Jones? Because we're all of different ages, we're all of different sort of backgrounds. So, you know, I mean, Steve, you displayed a short video on WhatsApp to us the other day of your wonderful quality comics, QC Comics editions, which I was like watching it.
Which I'd forgotten I had. Which I actually forgotten I had. Yes. I was there on day 1, 1984, the original 2000 AD weekly issues, which I will admit to you both, because you're my brothers and I love you, I had to sell when I got married. But I've since picked up the collected, the best of 2000 AD monthly magazines. Scott, you must know those. Picked those up, picked the single collected edition, and I recently, when we first talked about doing this show, picked up the new stunning painted colour versions.
I would say they've recolored it, haven't they?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
I have not seen that.
It.
Is that I
honestly thought, because Gibson's art is so light, so almost scratchy in place, I thought, no, colour's going to destroy it. The colour artist they picked to do it clearly loved it, clearly is a talented artist, and it does look beautiful. It's well worth picking up if you haven't. Really, really lovely.
Yeah, when Paul and I did Hard Boiled, that had been recolored, and that was again, like you said, Steve, it was done by somebody who cared. Yeah. So I would love to see it in color. I've never seen it, other than the covers. I've never seen it in color.
Oh, it's beautiful. I would offer to go and get it, but it's upstairs in my office and my wife's asleep. So
no, it's definitely it's one of those I've been tempted by, because I mean, it's like yourself, Tony. It's one of those I only really know in black and white. You know, sort of. I know that when it was originally published in 2000 AD, I think it's basically the opening pages of some chapters were coloured, but it was obviously such cheap paper and all that kind of stuff that the colouring was never great.
Colouring on the quality comics ones is terrible.
Oh really? Is it outside the lines and flat and all that kind of?
No, it's just rubbish.
Oh really? They were
not only that, they stretched the art to fit the American format as well.
Yeah.
So, but it's lovely to hand it in a little handy.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to admit, I mean, the version I've referred to for this recording is 2000 AD, the Ultimate Collection, the monthly thing that Hachette have been doing, and that's it's a wonderful collection.
It's a different picture. That's not Ian Gibson.
No, mine is not. Mine's the digital edition. It's the American Kindle edition.
Yeah, but that version, that cover is also in the 2000 AD shop as well. So it's a nice modern cover. Okay, yeah. So you came across it in the original format. So what about you, Tony? Where was your
No. So for me, because 2000 AD, like Julian, I know he has been scrapping 2000 AD his whole life, and I wasn't. Like, so for me, Halo Jones is one of those you come to when you're going down an Alan Moore rabbit hole, and so for me, it was a situation of when I started the show, I want to do something that's epic. So, what do I know? What are the things that I'm embarrassed that I knew about but didn't read? So for me, I've only read Halo within the last year as an adult. I didn't read it in the 80s. I know. I'm sorry if you guys.
No, that's great because that's a fresh new perspective. That's great.
Yeah. So for me, it was a matter of it's one of those Alan Moore books that I can't get without buying because he's Alan Moore. So like, you know how he is. But because of his Swamp Thing run, his Watchmen run, DR and Quinch, I had to buy, of course, because I wish thank you. Happy to have done. So
excellent book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we love, and honestly, when Steve and I put that show out, the amount of like comic book people who were so excited, like we got more retweets from like active working comic book writers and artists than I ever have on any show other than that one, because people love that. So with Alan Moore, it was just one of those things where it's like, well, there's not a library edition that I can get my hands on. And so I just kind of waited and embarrassingly didn't read it. I could get my hands on From Hell. I could get my hands on all of his other League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So then it was like, well, this show for me, my part of this, the Indie Comic Spotlight show is about trying to reach those things that are like the embodiment of indie comics. And so for me, this was just sitting there on my to read list, and I had a reason. So I'm brand new, coming at it as a 47-year-old. So.
Well, that's like, as Steve says, it's all good because you come out with a fresh pair of eyes. It's a new perspective. I mean, for me, I came into 2000 AD, late 80s, early 90s. Sort of, I dabbled in it first, and then it was Judge Dredd that pulled me in, and I sort of
stuck my toe in.
Yeah.
Well, the anarchist waters.
That's it. Well, I was raised on like the Beano and Dandy, these sort of fun comics.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, they're a bit young for me now. And then all of a sudden, you sort of see this, you come across Judge Dredd, and you're like, oh, okay. And so as I was growing up, there were older people I knew that had older brothers that sort of had read 2000 AD, and they were the ones that going, if you read it now, you should go back and read so-and-so, you should try and find so-and-so, and all these others, and they would give me older issues. And so I'd read bits and pieces of Halo, but it wasn't really until the late 90s when I think I picked up a couple of sort of the collected, when it was Fleetway that had 2000 AD, and they were letting out some of those, and I picked those up from a charity shop at some point, in the sort of the late 90s. And so I read those. I read it then, and again, they're like I said, gone by. I don't know where they are now. And so I rebought it, obviously, with this. So it took me it's been a few years to read it. But as you say, Tony, it's one of those sort of Alan Moore books that everyone knows, those A-list ones. The sort of like your Watchmen, your From Hell, and Swamp Thing. Yeah, and they're all great. Exactly, yeah, and they're all great, and I love them. However, there's this sort of like, if you're in the know, you go and read this. Yeah. And in that group, to me, is Halo Jones, Miracle Man.
Oh, yes.
Those books where you go, no, that, and Miracle Man in particular is a real favourite of mine. And again, the other one, maybe one day we'll get to, is like his Future Shocks as well. Like one of the big
and the Time Twisters, brilliant.
Yeah. So.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so to me, like Halo's always just been one of those comics, as sort of a classic of 2000 AD, but also, and Steve, I don't know how what your thoughts on this are, but it's one of those books that when I got into university and when I was doing my A levels and stuff, and I did psychology and sociology, it was one of those books that sort of got referenced. People who were, again, in the know would be like, well, if you want to know sort of like people's opinion on Thatcher in the 80s and youth culture and stuff, here's a couple of comics to refer to. And Halo Jones is always in that reference pool. So it's just sort of been in the sort of secondary zeitgeist for me.
With my female students who were interested in getting comics but are put off by people in tights beating the crap out of each other, this is the kind of book I hand them and say, listen, read this. And honestly, 9 times out of 10, it's worked. So it's just before its time in every single way, but we'll come to that when we talk about it. But like I said, I did sadly sell my originals, but what I didn't sell, and I still have, is my issues 1 to 100 of 2000 AD from 1977 to 1950. So the first 2 years worth. And I managed to get the first Judge Dredd story Brian Bolland ever drew, signed by Brian Bolland as well.
Wow. So Steve could own us, is what we understand. If he chose to sell you can buy and sell us.
Yeah, about that. Well, do you know what? People are saying that I should sell the Quality Comics ones. They're awful, but apparently they're really sought after.
They are, because I've got a couple of because Quality Comics obviously was Fleetway's way of getting into the American market, and they re-released a load of stuff. Like there's a load of like Road Trip,
nearly all of it. Slane, 2000 AD,
Nemesis. So and I know that they basically, I think the thing was, because they were so shoddy in their reproductions that nobody kept them, so they've all been binned off and stuff. So they're actually, there's a couple of issues that come up quite a lot, but there's a lot that they're quite rare. They're quite rare.
Right. I've got nearly all of them.
Yeah, it's a good collection to have. Not to read. Yeah. Not to read from. Yeah, but go to other editions. There's much nicer editions, but yes, they are sought after.
For me, the digital edition of this, and I know I'm in the minority, and I love a good comic, and I love to get them in the Section 12 stuff that I've been reading from Lenovations Press. He's been sending me the physical copies, and they're so bright and gorgeous, and on the thick, what we called in America, we called it Baxter paper in the 80s. Yeah. So I love that. But the thing that I like about a digital comic, and what I like about the 2000 AD digital stuff, the Dredd stuff that I've read, and the Halo stuff, and DR and Quinch, is that by putting it digitally, I'm allowed to, I can zoom in, I can go in comics mode. And because, like you said earlier, Steve, some of it is kind of dirty. And it was all dirty. It was all so quick. I watched that movie, Scott, that you recommended about 2000 AD, the documentary.
Yeah.
And how quickly they were just pats, like, put shit out, put shit out, put shit out. Yeah. So some of the quality of the art, the fact that Ian Gibson did this week to week is bananas to me. So, of course, some of it isn't going to be the best. So for me, the digital, being able to like turn my iPad, and I've got a big iPad, turn it sideways and do comics view, and I can get like one panel. So I feel like I have that opportunity to really like appreciate the shit that's going on in the background. While I would love to see those quality comics, no matter how crappy they are, Scott, I would love to touch them. I feel like this is my reading experience, and I think I appreciate that, because again, going back to Hard Boiled, it's the same thing. Reading Hard Boiled originally as a comic and from Dark Horse, and then reading it digitally later, you're like, holy shit, the stuff that I missed. So I'm curious, as we have our conversation this evening, how much stuff I'm seeing in the background by zooming in on that digital stuff that maybe never
we've missed. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's good or bad. I mean,
definitely interesting.
Yeah. It'll be part of the conversation for sure. And I just wanted to preface that, because I'm coming at it from that perspective of someone who's seeing, essentially, as you said, the fact, Steve, that you have all those original, the first 100 2000 ADs, those were just like shitty paper. So the fact that you still have them, I don't know how well they've held up. They were made to be disposable, right?
They're actually not bad, because again, I picked them up when I was 77 or 8 years old. And most of my comics from that period, particularly my superhero ones, I've drawn all over them, written this comic belongs to Steve Ray on them, drawn moustaches on some characters. But for some reason, the 2000 ADs are largely immaculate. I mean, the free gifts have gone the way of the dodo.
Yeah,
the little masks and the badges and stuff that you got. And I think it was a spinner or something.
Spinner.
One.
Yeah.
Dave. But the comics, I pulled them out. When did I last pull them out? About a year ago. Pretty okay. So that's blind luck. 'Cause I think I read them, and because they weren't stuff I'd read again. I mean, because from that era, the stuff I've worn out to pieces, and people are wanting to kill me about it, is all my old Captain Britons and all my old Warriors and stuff like that. Those are destroyed because I read them to death. But luckily, my 2000 ADs, not bad.
Excellent. Nice. Right, so we've circled around it. Let's get stuck in. Let's get onto the hoop, shall we? Let's sort of
onto the right. We start on the hoop.
We do indeed. So also, I was to say I'll give you a plot, because really the plot's relatively simple in the first one at least. It follows Halo Jones and her roommates and the life on the hoop, which is a construction off the coast of America, off the coast of New York.
Manhattan Island in particular. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where the unemployed and poor are located, and they live off a credit card given by the government. And MAM card, that's it. And then on this occasion, Halo and one of her housemates, Rodice, have to go off on a shopping trip.
Oh my God!
They have to go grocery shopping.
It's just like going to Croydon.
Yeah, they have to go grocery shopping, which turns out to be a more life-changing adventure than me popping to the local co-op ever will. But that's it, and that's literally
the whole story. That's all of Volume 1. Yeah, it's bananas. It's
great.
But
it's world building. It's what we. Alan Moore is one of those guys that you hate or you love or both at the same time. Like you build a voodoo doll of Alan Moore and you stab it, and then you're like, I'm sorry, and you take the needles out and you hug it and give it a kiss. And that's what I felt reading Volume 1 of Halo Jones. It's like he gives us, Scott, the simplest story, but the layer of everything that's there. And Halo's what, 15, 16 when we first meet her?
She turns 18 on the Clara Pandy, doesn't she? So she
yes.
17.
17
years old. So you got the 17-year-old orphan living with her friends, and it's one of those things where you're like, on its surface, you're like, why the fuck would I want to read that? But then you're like, oh, I can't stop reading it. What are you doing? And so I'm curious, Steve, because you read it in real time and I'm reading it as an adult. So I'll be frank right off the top. And again, if you guys need to kick me off the show at any time for saying this, I found Volume 1 a bit, again, just like my feelings about Alan Moore, painful. Like I loved it and I hated it at the same time.
To be fair, Tony, so did Pat Mills.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
Is that right?
It's true.
Yeah. His feedback was, this isn't going to sell.
Yeah,
and so
how wrong was he?
And so the future editions were influenced by that. But
I did not know that. Okay.
No, yeah.
Reading it firsthand, Tony, because you're more closer to my age.
Yeah,
put yourself in that 80s mindset and picture the Distant Drummers as the first people who had Walkman. I don't know if you guys remember the original Terminator movie and the girl who lived with her headphones on.
Yes.
That's what it was like in the 80s with anyone who had. There you go. Those things literally, even though we've got MP3s and instant gratification and music you can get from the web whenever you like now, if you had a Walkman and 10 or 20 cassettes, you lived in those things. So 100%. I literally just saw Alan Moore just getting the 80s and throwing darts at it. And saying, listen, this is what's going to happen to us. Starting with a Walkman, it's going to end up with music being piped into our brains. And honestly, I think it was quite prophetic.
Yeah. Well, again, the things that you're looking at. I mean, the drummers is one thing, but even like the hoop. I mean, like he's clearly looking around at like council estates and going, and yes, he set it in America because that's sort of the distance, exoticism of it all, but. It's clearly going like, no, this is a future council estate. We won't even want them on land anymore. We are going to push them out to sea, so we have nothing to do with them. And I love the fact that later in the story, you say about world building, like things that crop up, that the residents of Manhattan Like, they despise the people from the Hoop. Like, if you step foot on land, like, you better have a good reason to be there, sort of thing. And I just love all these, like you say, throwing darts in the 80s, and things keep coming up throughout this. But even the police, I mean, we'll get to it all in detail, but like, it's clear how angry Alan Moore was.
Yes.
In the 80s, and like you say, although this is a bit of a slog at times, this first volume in some ways, it is but it is good. But I think there are, because it's such short chapters.
Yeah.
Because they're 8 pages, aren't they? Like 6 to 8 pages. So you do sort of like whiz through it. It's 10 chapters, bangs through it. But there's a couple, and I think this is a curse of 2000 AD though. It's the Stan Lee thing, isn't it? Every issue is going to be someone's first issue.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to a piece where in the first page of like one of the next chapters is going to be, just so you know, here's what happened in the last one. So there's a bit of that in this first one, and I think Alan Moore's storytelling, you see it just grow and develop throughout this book, and as you do with all his books. But I just think, like you say, throwing darts in the 80s is so what this book is. To be a teenager, but to have a beardy bloke doing it is so bizarre.
It's not just that. Do you not find the whole book prophetic? I mean, the whole thing about the Hoop, which really blows my mind reading it now as an adult, is now I see, well, hang on, it's tethered off the coast of Manhattan. They have to open it regularly for giant tidal waves to pass through it. Did Alan Moore already see global warming and the sea levels rising and everything else that goes with it? I mean, this guy, his V for Vendetta is so prophetic as well. It's like he had his eye on the future, thinking, this is what we're going to do if we don't wake up and start smelling the coffee pretty damn soon.
Well, no, I think you're right, because I mean, the two of the things that really jump out of me in this book is the glorification of fame.
Yep.
You know, they've got the band,
celebrity culture.
Yeah, so already there's, you know, they've got the band. I can't remember what it's called now, but you know, she plays the weird
Ice
sort of
10.
instrument.
Yes,
that's it. I said
Missing Planet Boy.
Ice 9 is from Cat's Cradle.
Yeah. And and they keep saying to her, like, look, this is your way out. Like, get famous, get out, get signed. Like, you get off the Hoop. This is a way out. And, you know, you see that in this, of this sort of like, you know, be discovered. It's a way out of these things. And that's the dream, isn't it? That, again, was the sort of like, you know, this 80s, not just the American dream, but it was the dream, wasn't it, to be discovered, whether you be an actor or a singer or a model. And you know, you could see this group now would turn up on, like, you know, the X Factor, or, you know, one of those other sort of Britain's Got Talent. And it's, you know, so that you've got that sort of element as well. But the other one thing that sort of is less of a, it's less prominent, but I think it comes up, is this thing about aliens in immigration. That the Hoop is loaded with these you know, these different types of aliens, and I love the design. Ian Gibson's art is fantastic. These aliens that have got legs but no arms.
Yeah, they're armless. Sorry.
Yeah. Totally they don't
armless.
make it, but there's none of them on the mainland. So again,
well, in America too. Remember, well, or maybe you don't remember because you weren't forced to learn this bullshit. So off America, like everybody knows off Manhattan Island is Liberty Island.
Yes.
But also there's Ellis Island.
Yes.
Which is where the immigrants came. Right. So when people came to America, they were literally shipped to an island and I've been on Ellis Island, and it is just a rock, literally, like in the Hudson River, and they'd be there they would just stand all day. And their lives would change. Their names would change. Like if your name was too Polish sounding. Like I used to work with a guy whose last name was Pierce, and he was like, yeah, no, it was like Przinski was his real last name, but it was his grandpa's last name. But like his great grandpa came, they were like forced into Pierce. That was your name. Do you want to move? Do you want to be left off this island, or do you want to get back on this boat and go back to Europe? Then we're going to change your name. So to me, the Hoop being where it is reminiscent of that, and that we're going to stop you. Like, you can see America's right there.
Yeah.
But we're not going to let you in. And that's also what I love about it, is it's also where we're going to spend our Americans that we don't care for either. That we would, if one of these other boats, or in this case ships, wants to take them away, which is of course what happens to Halo, by all means, feel free to take the riffraff. So I found that like an interesting commentary, and I love the way he looks at that. And that's what I loved about Dredd. I love about Dredd too, is that outside look at America. We don't look at ourselves this critically like we should. And so I appreciate that was how I read it. Is it's like Ellis Island, the Hoop, whatever. It's we're going to let you get tantalizingly close, but we're not letting you in.
Well, it is. It becomes like a holding place. I mean, that's literally what it is, isn't it? It's for both those that are pushed out and those that aren't allowed in. It's almost like a halfway house that you're never going to get out of. I mean, that's why it's a circle. You know, that's why it's designed to be a circle, both I suppose symbolically and I suppose sort of practically. You can just keep walking around it and around it. And that you are never, well, you know, you probably wouldn't want to from looking at this or the stuff that goes on, but that's the point, isn't it? Like it's endless, it's a loop. You never get off it. And when they do literally go outside to you know, they go on the surface of it, which is a great. I do like that bit.
Hilarious.
Is the fact that but Rhodesi's response is like, I don't like being outside, but it's more than agoraphobia, like because there's large spaces inside the hoop. It's a literal fear of being outside the hoop. Leaving the hoop terrifies her. She's become so. Yeah, exactly. But it is, isn't it? It not only does it sort of, when you stop there, it institutionalizes you, doesn't it? Yeah. This becomes a literal prison. And I find that really interesting that they then start to find entertainment, because I'm just looking at one of the pictures. It's in chapter 4. No, it's the end of chapter 3. They just escape it. The Clara Pandy's about to be has arrived, and there's this glorification of anything exotic. Yes. And it's coming to being dismantled, and then they say, but they're going to let it go off again. And then so they say, what is it? Data Daddy supplementary news splash. It's Swifty Frisco. Get this: despite earlier denials, Alki Baron Lux Rothchop, we'll talk about him more, has placed a bid for the ESS Clara Pandy. The demolition has been cancelled. And they've all circled because they've all turned up to have a riot because the Clara Pandy was going to be destroyed. And then they're like, oh, no. And they're like, what? Well, now they're going to riot because it's being saved. Right. So, again, like they're just
like
there
Twitter.
to riot. Yeah, exactly. And I love the fact that these people are like, well, we've turned up to have a fight. So whatever happens, we're having a fight.
No matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's that you say about it being prophetic, Steve. It is exactly that. It's
so real. It's the most real, unreal sci-fi you'll ever read, and that's what I love about it. It's fantastic.
But that's the thing with Alan Moore. Again, that you want to hug him and you want to stab him and then you want to take the knife out and tell him you're sorry. Is that he gives you everything about him. Is everybody's flawed. He makes you like. V's a monster. But you're like, I get you. I'm with you, man. I get you. And with this, nobody's super likable at all. But you're like, all right, you know, like
Halo is.
Because she's so in this first volume. By the end, you're totally in love with her. Yeah. But in volume 1, she's just like.
She's a shiftless teen, isn't she? That's
she
the
is.
point.
She's shiftless.
She's
probably what I was when I read it. That's probably
exactly. Yeah, but she is. But I say, but she's a protagonist, but without being proactive. Like,
right.
One of the key things, especially I'd say about the first 2 volumes. No, the first volume in particular is there's no driver, there's no hero. Like she does things, but it's not until the very end of the book when. Is it Brina? I can't
Brina.
Yeah, Brina.
Brina is murdered. That she's a bit like, do you know what? Fuck this. I'm off. I'm done. It takes. I mean, what I find interesting is that, like, say, you know, it's great that she gets to that point because you go on that journey, but you watch her go through life on the hoop, and you are constantly going like, what are you doing? Why? And it takes all these events for her to be going, well, maybe I should. I don't know. It sounds hard. And then when Brina is killed,
hard.
Yeah, that's
and
the
when
point,
Ludi joins the drummers as well, because when she realizes that the one person who could get away, who had a legitimate escape route, throws it away. She thought, well, bugger that for a game of soldiers. I'm not doing that. I'm getting out of here.
Exactly. It takes like some serious events for her to get any agency to actually do anything with her life. Like the thing I find interesting about this book, and I'm pretty sure this is what Pat Mills would have got annoyed about, is it has no agency. Like, things happen chapter to chapter, and I enjoy the read. And there's some sections in this first volume I really enjoy that I just find funny. But she has no real agency. You're not going towards anything. Like, she's literally going to the shops to get some stuff and then coming back. It's not really until the second volume that she starts to develop an agency and that sort of thing. And that's why I sort of think it's interesting, this thing about the Ballad of Halo Jones. This first issue, this first volume is almost like, if this was a biopic, if you were to do the biography of Halo Jones, and obviously we don't know the rest of her life beyond book 3, this would be 10 minutes at the beginning.
No, yeah, this isn't even Act 1. If this is you've said it perfectly, as a 3-act structure, because that's all we get, unfortunately.
Yeah. This was meant to be 9 books, I believe, wasn't it? The original intention.
9, yeah. So we only get a 3-act structure. I'm with you. Like, this is people would walk out of the movies and it'd be like, no, wait, it's going to be okay. And this is the thing, Steve, you mentioned you were a teenager when you were reading this. So I think this is he's capturing that, which is, she annoys the fuck out of me, but it's like, but having raised 4 daughters who are now all adults, it's like, I get, like, they would love this, because this is like, I feel put upon. The shit keeps happening to me. So while the first act is kind of slow and a slog, it's totally worth the trip, because we remember, Steve, and I would love to hear, reading this as a teenager, you felt put upon, right?
Oh yeah, as a teenager, definitely.
Yeah.
But I disagree that this is slow and meandering. I think it's fascinating, and it draws me. I mean, even reading it now for the 100th time, it drew me in because of just how sorry I felt for these people, because they were literally thrown away and discarded. And living in London, when you go up to places like Covent Garden or the Strand, and you see affluence, you see Trafalgar Square, you see the museums, and you see people in sleeping bags on the street, I just thought, well, shit, this is a bit too real.
Yeah.
So for me, I just see the familiarity of book 1.
It's relatable. I totally agree with that. There's a relatability in this that I think, which is totally what Alan Moore was going for. You're supposed to relate to Halo. And as I sort of, again, reading this when I first did, when I read them as books in that late 90s, that's me in my sort of late teens. I've been about the same age, 17, 18, really, when I'm reading this. I do like the first volume. I do. But I'm saying, like, because this is supposed to be the Ballad of Halo Jones. Like, and the ballad, and they say, what do they say? If you're going to write a story, it's the most important thing that's happened to your characters. It's sort of like, this captures a couple of events, but they don't happen until like issue 7 or episode 7. But like you said, the rest of the book, the reason I like it is because of the world building, because of the ideas that have been thrown at me left, right, and center. There's stuff. This is hard sci-fi in a sort of a really British, interesting way. But if I was writing a biopic, if I had to make this a film, this is 10 minutes at the beginning. Like, if this was a lifetime documentary about Halo Jones, it's Halo Jones spent her life on the her young life on the hoop. She left after, housemate Brianna after a tragic murder, and there her life begins. That's what this volume is. Now we get an extra bit of it, but I do enjoy it. Like, the world building. The one thing I would say though is to your point there, Steve, and I'm never ever going to say that I'm questioning Alan Moore or that I think he's wrong. But one of the things I feel is missing a little bit from this is that contrast. So we get the full life on the hoop, but I would love to have seen she gets to Manhattan and here's that affluence that's sort of like within throwing distance. Because it's so dark, and she gets to Clarapandy, which is supposed to represent it in some sort of way. But you never see the rich people's life, or you never see how the other half live until book 2, really. And so I always think that when I've read reading book 1 this time, I was like, oh, I'd love to have seen just that other side of what's in America. I think
that's the whole point of book 2, to show that contrast. Book 1 is, well, this is her life and what she came from, and this is what she was missing. So I think that's the whole purpose of it. But also, plus the fact, if you look at all the seeds that are sown in something that comes out of Swifty Frisco's mouth, or what's playing on a newscast in the background that they mention, the Tarantula Nebula, Luxroth Chop, even I think Rat Wars mentioned somewhere at a point, and it's all little things that are building and building and building and building to what happens in book 3. And like you said, if they were making a documentary of her life, and that's hilarious because book 2 starts with this professor.
Yes, that's what I love. That's what made me.
It's the best recap in the history of comics. I think it's genius.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right, and I think Alan Moore's sort of seed dropping is good, because I think you're right that the Rat War comes in book 2, and even then you're like, what? And you're sort of suggesting that there's something bigger, and I love the payoff, and we'll get to that when we get to this point.
It's written like one little chapter, and then boom, it's like one of the most important things ever.
Yeah,
and the scary shit about that is, we'll talk about that when we get to book 2. Yeah, we'll talk about.
But you're right. Like you say, the news stuff and that, like, the background, and which again tapping into this idea of 24-hour cycle.
This is 84.
Yeah,
and people rave about Frank Miller and the Dark Knight Returns, and how rather than have the captions and the meanwhiles and this, that, and the other, he used the TV. Alan Moore did that before him in Halo Jones. So
he did.
Yeah,
innovation.
I was curious what you guys thought towards the end of book 1, as we're getting ready to make that transition, when if it jarred just a little at first, and then I was like, I'm glad he did this. He switches to a first-person narrator at the end of book 1 before Halo leaves. It's the first time we actually hear her as the narrator. That jarred to me the first read, and the second read. This is also one of those books that needs that, like, when you're done with it, you're like, was that the best thing I've ever read, or did I hate it? I should probably go read it again. Like, it was one of those for me the first time through. So that just, as somebody who's always thinking kind of about narrative structure, and Alan Moore doesn't give a fuck. So he all of a sudden has her talking in first person. What did you guys think of that? Was that jarring for you, or on this reread, did you get the second time through? I'm like, oh, okay. The first time through, I'm like, wait. What is this?
It's going to Scott's point where she has no direction. She's literally living vicariously through Rich Brinner in Rich Brinner's apartment, and through Odise, who's a big, tough, macho, don't get in my way kind of girl with the Zenades and the sput sticks and everything else. And it's then also through Ludi and playing her music and thinking, oh, this girl can get out. Oh, I love her. She's my hero. She can do this. And then she realizes, well, fuck this, it's down to me. And that's when the switch happens. That's when she stops living via her friends and her roommates and thinking, well, I've got to do this for myself. And I actually think that's genius. I actually think it's really clever.
I agree, and it's because it comes at a really interesting time as well, because it sort of comes. It's a post. They've done everything. It comes. I'm looking at it. It happens in episode 7. Is the switch, and everything's happened at that. They've been successfully shopping, and they're on their way home, and it's her reflection on the things that have happened. And as you say, Steve, it's a narrative shift, because it's also and it's that thing of agency, isn't it? Like you say, she's gone through all this stuff, and I love the fact that, like, although she is the title character of the people she lives with, actually, she's at the bottom of the pile. Really,
absolutely,
and it's this story, as you say, sort of like, but it's this episode 7 where she sat on the travel home writing this stuff, and you realise actually how switched on she is. Like, she gets people, like, she's, there's a great comment where she's like, well, Rhodys is asleep, but when she wakes up, she'll claim she never was.
Yep.
And that dribble,
so right.
and the fact that she's dribbled down, and she'll blame on somebody else. Like, and that's exactly what happens. And so you clock onto the fact that actually Halo's
smart.
Yeah, she's smart, like, and it tells you this chapter in particular tells me then this is the Halo that we're going to start to know, and so it's like world building up to that point, and then Halo Jones comes into frame of that point, and because that 7 is the one where it all really changes, because it's almost like an epilogue. in like a weird way. Like 7, 8,
It is.
7, 8, 9, and 10. It's like four episodes, almost like this weird epilogue of going, well, you had this weird adventure going shopping, but here's the real tragedy. But I'm almost gonna have it as an add-on. Like any other writer would have had the event of like Brinner would have been murdered in episode 2
or 3, yeah.
And then the book would have been her dealing with the grief and then eventually leaving the hoop. But this is where you've got like all the fun, tragedy, I'm off. And it's like this split-second decision where she's like, and I love the final scene is where, like you say, you see the carnage in the apartment, and it's you just go, fuck, like something's gone down at this point. This is where it changes pace for me. And I love it. It's the end. I like the end of this book 1 more than the start. I would say.
I agree. I do too.
I'll be the dissenting voice. I love it all.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. It's not to say I hate the rest, but I think I prefer that it switches up a gear. But and again, this comes down to the talent that is Ian Gibson as well. Like not to mention, because the moment that Luddy comes in, and they've sort of the way it's drawn, because again his art gets more real through the books as the story gets more real.
Real growth in his talent, absolutely.
Yeah, but that reveal of Luddy when she's given up is hard.
That's part 8, and it's actually called When the Music's Over. So you're like, fuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is where, and again, like, and it's thrown in. This is where Luddy throws it into Halo's face. Like, I've got it here. This is Luddy speaking. She's, yeah, but maybe I don't want to get killed in a side artery, just to make you proud of me. I'm sick of living up to your escape fantasies, Halo. I don't want to listen to you anymore. Like, unfortunately, she's given up, but she recognizes that that Halo's been living vicariously through her. And it's this final stab, isn't it, of like basically someone saying, "Go live your own life.
Yeah,
go do it."
Well, but that's just it. Is that I don't feel that Ludi's choice. It's the choice that made sense for her, and I think so. Halo's choice at the end of Volume 1 to leave. It's equivalent. They're both giving up on the hoop. It's just that Ludi's going to stay there and be safe. There's a reason that in my country, and I don't know what happens there, people join gangs because they're not because they're killers or they're bad people, and that always drives me crazy. It's because there's safety in the gang. The gang keeps you protected. It's like, well, my mom, I got to help take care of my mom, or I got to help take care of my little brother or whatever. So I'm going to join this gang because now I've got protection. So now I can walk the streets and my brother can walk the streets, or my sister or my mom, and I'm not stressed out. So to me, Ludi was just like, this is her way out. And it's just the same as Halo getting on the ship. It's like their lives suck so much. And I think that's what Moore is saying is the hoop is so terrible, which is why it had to be what it was as a builder. It had to annoy me a little because it's supposed to. I want to leave too. That's good writing.
Exactly.
Moore makes me hate the hoop. I don't want to spend it. I'm done. Let's go.
It's one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think in some sci-fi you have aspirational sci-fi. You get those dystopias where you go, oh, I'd love to live there. This sort of whether it be sort of a utopia or just, but I think again though, but this comes to what 2000 AD was about. I mean, like this stands up next to Dread and showing you Mega City 1, where you go like, you go look at this, all the action, all the cool stuff's going on. I don't want to go there though because it's terrifying.
It is.
And even in this, I mean, even the police in this, the one thing I wanted to say about the police, the Rumblejacks that come in at the end. And, this is more really having a go at Thatcher's authoritarian police of basically saying, these guys have now got chips in their head and they've had all their emotions removed.
Former criminals, some of them.
Former criminals, that
brain wiped.
Yeah, and you meet one guy who isn't.
Yeah.
But he's
a volunteer.
Yeah, and that's where, but they set him up to almost be like sympathetic. But then you realise like he's a volunteer, so he's choosing to do this of his own volition. And as you say, nothing. As you do this world building, nothing is aspirational in this place.
No,
like nothing. until you get to the very, very end, when they do show you the escape and you get the Clara Pandy, and it's this sort of like bastion of beauty and sort of like, you know, lavish living. And I love the fact how he's written the sort of tech guy that you sort of have to read his speech bubbles. You have to read his speech bubbles
I know
3 or
that
4
guy.
times. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so before just to finish off book 1, really, the ending of book 1, you know, we've had the one thing is that you've had Rhodese has been sort of, yes, you know, she's been the tough one, and this sort of shows her up to be the fact that it's all a charade, it's all bullshit.
100%.
Totally.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts then on that sort of like, you know, this final thing of Halo just grabbing life by the balls and making a decision to go off on the Clara Pandy?
Real. It's like, oh, finally, thank God she's decided to make a choice and do something, because that was the thing. It's like you said, that it was frustrating, but being of that age, actually a few years younger, because I was like 14, 84, and she was like 17, 18, I thought like, yeah, the only person who's going to live your life is you, so live it. And it's something that's stuck with me. Hence to the point that I'm a 50-year-old man recording podcasts about comics with my mates. It's just like,
living the dream, Steve.
Living the dream.
Exactly.
Living the dream.
Damn straight. So
you guys are staying up late for this too. It's like almost 7 where I am, and it's almost midnight where you are. So that says everything we need to know about your commitment to this. To me, Scott,
I should be committed. You're quite right. Yeah.
To me, Scott, the thing that I liked about it is I was in America, they call them straight edge kids. And I'm not, like, I wasn't religious or anything, but like straight edge kids are, it's like, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke. I like didn't do any of that until I was like an adult. And it was just a choice I made. And it was hard in a little tiny shit town that I lived in. Everybody drank and smoked or whatever. And I had friends or whatever, but once I was out of there, I was out of there. And there's like 2 people, 3 from my, one's a relative. So, you know, 3 people from my high school with whom I'm in contact. And so I could relate to Halo, like, wait a minute, I'm just here. You are my tribe because I'm trying to survive with you. But now that there's this ship here, and that's my chance. So I could see like me going off to college as my moment. It's like, this is my time. I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to get the fuck out of here, and I'm not going to come back. And I spent one summer of my 19th birthday, after I turned 19, back in my hometown, and I was so fucking miserable. And I was like, so I was like with Halo. And that's what I love about this, is that as we transition, Halo doesn't come back. She goes. So that was my feeling, is that as what an ending. I'm with her. Like, I think, again, I didn't hate Volume 1. I hated slogging through Volume 1 because I hate the hoop. What a terrible life. And it's only because Gibson's such a talent and Alan Moore's writing is so good that I could hate it. I could hate it on her behalf.
Yes.
And so I'm with her. I'm like, I'm getting on the ship. And then when Rhodese says, I'm not going to go, I'm like, of course you aren't. And I know that kid. I went to high school with that kid. We all did. You're like,
all mouth and trousers.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mouth and trousers. Yeah. Nice. Well said.
I think you referred to sort of you know, college, and I think, you know, university would be the term for me.
University is what it would be. Yeah.
But the thing for me, thinking about it from an 80s perspective, and the fact this is supposed to be reflective of those, you know, where you say the projects in America and the council estates over here, it's the workforce. That's what this is for her. Would be this would be independence. I think the Clara Pandy represents financial independence. Like, look, you're no longer being sustained by the government. You're not, you know, you're no longer going to be hassled by the police. You've got a job. You can now go off and do your things. Like, you know, it's to me, I was reading this, it felt symbolic of that thing of like, it's not getting on the ship. It's getting a job. I'm now going to be someone. I've got a role. I've got some part to play. I can now contribute and become who I want to be. And that doesn't always work out, as we sort of, you know, you get to learn a bit. But that's that first step of saying, I get to get away from the hoop, this circle I was constantly walking on, just going round and round. I'm taking that step, and I'm going to go join the world of employment and the freedom that can provide. So it's such a going back to it, it's just relatable. This first book is so relatable. And, you know, I think both of you said sort of like, if I've got a 7-year-old, she's you know, she turns 8 later this year, but when she gets into her teens, You know, when she hits those troubled teens, the first time she starts being a knob about, you know, when she starts getting to the teenage girl, I'm like, here's Halo Jones. Yeah, go read book 1 of Halo Jones, and then come back and tell me you have a hard life.
Yeah, for me, Halo is one of the best everyman characters ever created. But what makes me love her more than anything is, like you said, Scott, she escapes by getting this job. But how does she get it? She, like us, is an ultra nerd.
Yes.
I got called Bat Boy growing up, and she got this job for being an Aquabot pet and loving the dolphins and learning their language. And damn you, girl, let your nerd flag fly, because that's what got you off the hoop. And to me, that was so honestly inspirational that I thought, because I was 14 already. There was people saying, "Oh, you're still reading comics," and that's part of the reason why I thought, "Well, fuck it, yeah." One day it's going to lead to something, and what are we doing now, boys?
Exactly. Yeah, it's your passion in life, and that's what it's. You know, let your flag fly. Halo Jones, we salute you.
Yep. My hero.
Yes. Yeah. So,
I think you go.
No, I was going to say because I was going to say we'll move from book 1. We'll go to book 2 in a minute. So, have you got a final comment before we do?
Tony was about to say something.
No, that was just going to say. Yep, that was it. I was just going to say that I think that what I appreciate about book 1 is that it's like a boot camp for writers, right? If you're a writer, and I'm writers, we're all writers. We all write fiction. We all write stuff. Is that sometimes I'm actually having this bit of crisis in this new novel I'm writing. I'm on 21,000 words, and I feel like the action hasn't started yet. And I was talking to my wife about it today. But then I realized I need that. I need 75 pages of wind-up, and then I'm going to go, and that I'm building a world, and I need to quit pretending that everything, and I love Kafka, don't get me wrong, drop me in the middle of a story and let me go. But not everything has to be that. If everything was that, then Kafka wouldn't be Kafka, right? Yeah. He wouldn't be unique. I wouldn't love him because everyone would just drop me in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So I think what Alan Moore is doing here, volume 1 is, and remember, these 3 that we're covering is actually only the first act. This is supposed to be 9 parts. So 1, 2, and 3 is act 1. We're thinking of it. So you're right, Scott. This is only the first 10 minutes. But act 2, book 2 and book 3 are the rest of act 1. That's the first 45 minutes of the thing. So I bow down to him as a writer because he makes me despise being there, but I can't stop reading. So that says everything you need to know about what Alan Moore can do.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, there it is. Part 1, book 1 of our Halo Jones discussion. I really enjoyed this. It's a fantastic, massive discussion. It goes on, and you're going to find out more on 2 other wonderful podcasts, both of them appearing on the Comics in Motion network. The first one is Superheroes for Dummies, which Steve will be bringing out his part of this episode. And the other one is Indie Comics Spotlight with Tony. Links to both of those in the notes below, and they will be coming in quick succession after this show. So go and check those out. And also just go and check out Comics in Motion. Wonderful bunch of guys, really good friends of mine, and some fantastic content coming out of that network. So do go check that out. But if you're a fan of this show and you want to support us and all the usual things, you can find us on social media. That's at 20th Century Geek on all the social medias. If you want to email me, that's 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. Come and have a chat. Come let me know what you think. But if you do want to give your thoughts, your opinions, well, why not send a review? Go to your podcast catcher of choice. Whatever you're using to listen to this, go to that and leave a review. 1-star, 2-star, whatever it's going to be. Hopefully a 5-star review. But let us know and feedback. And just share this with your friends. How about share a tweet? Share a Facebook post. Come and find us and let your friends know. But if you really want to get involved, there are ways to support the show more than that. We have a Patreon. That's right, we have a Patreon page where you can make donations or become a patron. And if you want to become a patron, you will get a new monthly podcast specifically for the patrons. That's 30-minute thoughts, where each month I give my thoughts on a specific topic. And it's been some great discussions and topics on there, so go on and have a look. You also get quarterly the Creator Corner, where I bring on a special creator to talk about what it is they're doing, how they do it, and why they love what they're doing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you listening to this, and I hope you go off and listen to parts 2 and 3. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode.